No one has ever shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming.
We have a massive power, and it's the power to say no.
They put all these words on these flyers and it means nothing. It's garbage.
We're all going to die!
Doctors are gaslighting patients.
If you keep silent, then this is what's going to happen. And they'll make us silent.
I would rather paper cut my eyelids than have anything to do with those blokes.
I love that saying.
We are one people, one flag, one Australia.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the XCandidates. My name is Stephen Tribb, joined by Adam Zara. How are you going today, Adam?
I'm pretty good, Stephen. How you going, mate?
I'm very well, thank you. We're a little bit different tonight. We're not live streaming on Facebook as we have normally been because we did have a poll out and we are now on X. So if you're used to live streaming with us on Facebook, we now live stream on X, YouTube, and Rumble. Now, Adam, last week we had Kevin Lockray on, and that was in my opinion, probably the best episode we've done. Just fantastic information from Kevin, and I think we'll have Kevin on again. I just want to read some comments and then get your reaction. Just some of the feedback. I love reading the comments from people. So Malarax on Rumble said, this was incredibly informative. We must see to it that these initiatives are brought in. We need to keep fighting the good fight for our beloved country. That was on Rumble. And then this one on YouTube, Rosemary said, thank you, Stephen and Adam. This was the most brilliant, enlightening, and encouraging interview I've watched in years. Mr. Lockray would certainly have my vote. And Mara also said, awesome interview with Kevin Lockray. We need to hear a lot more from him. I will definitely be voting for him when he runs for the Senate. Thank you guys for bringing a rare good politician to light. We need more Kevins. How do you think about that, Adam?
Well, speaking to Kevin, it's really good that, patriotism has become a bit of a dirty word. And when you see a patriot actually speak and feel and really encouraged by, he's intelligent, he's a patriot, he's a good man, like it shines through. And I think the comments reflect that. They can see that, he's somebody who's an honest, genuine guy.
And more feedback was on Buy Me a Coffee. Now, this week, Catherine jumped on to Buy Me a Coffee after the interview with Kevin and bought us 5 coffees. So thank you very much, Catherine. We do really appreciate it. I say that every single time. Look, Adam and I will do this podcast for free, whether we're getting donations or not. But the fact that we have this option there for you, if you do want to contribute, it's completely up to you. It's your choice. If you do want to head to Buy Me a Coffee and support us there, you can, and we do appreciate it very, very much. So thank you, Catherine.
It does just help us cover the costs of running the StreamYard and StreamYard podcast. It does cost a little bit of money, and it just helps offset that. So thank you very much.
And one more plug before we get to our guest tonight. I did an interview with Victor DL through the week. He released it actually early this morning. So if you want to head to Rumble and head to Victor DL's page, please give him a follow. He definitely deserves it. I mean, the guy is doing some great work there. We really want to support other people that are in the independent media space. He's working hard. He does a tremendous amount of research. I was blown away with the research that he did for this episode. It goes for 2.5 hours, but it's well worth it. He said it was probably one of the best interviews he's done. So that was a nice little plug for me. But I just wanted to thank you, Victor, for having me on. And we talked about a whole bunch of different things with why I got into politics and what I faced in that time, and a lot of the stories that I haven't had the chance to speak about. And he talked about that. He said the paradox of being a podcaster is that you very rarely get to talk about your own story. So, he gave me the opportunity for that. So I appreciate it. And if you can check it out and support him, please do so. But on tonight,
he's another really good, genuine bloke as well. So, if you can support him and support, what do you call it? What are we? Not mainstream media. Get him on and, support everyone. Media. Independent media is the word I was looking for. So support independent media and, log on to him and follow and share his stuff as well.
Now I'm seeing we're getting our first viewers on X, so thank you very much for following us there. But we better go to this week. Now, last week we spoke to Kevin about, our system of government and some certain reforms and things that we might want to do. I think this episode dovetails a little bit with that because we're going to be speaking about freedom, but also some concepts of speeches and writing and persuasive language that is used now, but used in the past as well. And we might be able to discuss some elements of how we developed our systems of government and our ways of thinking, especially when it comes to individual sovereignty, national sovereignty, and freedom. So, yeah, our special guest tonight is Michael Gladkoff. He's a speechwriter, a copywriter, a public speaker trainer, and he's author of the book Speaking for Freedom. We'll bring him on right now. Michael, welcome to the XCandidates.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, this is going to be an exciting episode. Sorry, mate. Speaking about the language and the art of speech writing and how we can use it to, the art of persuasion and things like that. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Oh, great.
Now, you wrote this book. I mean, you've written a number of books, but this is your most recent.
Yeah.
Speaking for Freedom. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the book and why you wrote it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, it goes back a long time. When I was a lot younger in 1980, I saw Ronald Reagan speak the night before he got elected the first time. So he stopped. Well, I grew up in San Diego, California, and he spoke there. He said it was his lucky city, and he won that election. And really, after him winning, the mood of the country changed. It really shows the importance of leadership as far as, what type of leaders we have. And it really made an impact on me. A little bit later, I got interested in studying about freedom and ideas and libertarian ideas. I also, around that time, I joined Toastmasters. So all my, interests sort of came together into this. And I finally written a book about it many years later. But another big factor for me was, my dad had escaped from the Soviet Union during World War II. And that's a whole other thing I can talk about, sort of an adventure story about how that happened. But I grew up knowing, about the, difference between freedom and tyranny. And it was a big part of my life. And I met somebody, met a lot of their friends. And I met somebody who had tried to escape from the Soviet Union in the 60s and 70s, like 3 times. He built a life raft out of raincoats, things like that. So experiences like that, taught me about the importance of freedom. And I think we're really losing a lot of that in Western civilization, especially in Western nations, especially after the big COVID thing, where governments clamped down on a lot of people's freedoms. So that really inspired me to write the book. Also, I've been a speechwriter professionally since 2005 and written a lot of speeches for government, business, executives, top Fortune 500 companies. They're leaders in Australia. I've written speeches for them. And that led me to, sort of combine these interests into Speaking for Freedom, which goes into a lot of different subjects. But basically, it's not just how to write speeches or presentations, but it can be used for anything. It can be used for writing. There's a chapter in there about, campaign slogans, ideas you can use for that. So it covers the gamut of persuasive communication for freedom.
How do you fall into that? I feel like speech writing is almost like being an artist. Like you're either good at it or not, but you've been able to make a career of it. How did you fall into that line of work to begin with?
Well, I got into a long time ago, in the mid 80s, I got into Toastmasters. And as part of that, you write a lot of speeches. One might be to be humorous. Another one might be to inspire. So over the years I'd written, before I started as a professional speechwriter, I think I wrote like 80 speeches. And so I had a lot of experience under my belt before I did it for other people. And it's just a matter of, I guess, understanding what the speaker wants to say. So a lot of the times I'll interview people. I recently wrote a keynote where I spent about an hour in a meeting with that person and read a lot of articles about them and listened to podcasts on which they were guests. So that really, that type of information gives me the background. But also, in addition to that, I've done copywriting, which is a bit different of an art, and things like business writing, more boring things like award submissions and tenders. But I find speech writing to be the most interesting, because that really has the historical context. If you look at writing going back 2,000 years and more, before people really had ways of reproducing writing, speaking was the big communication medium, and that goes back to ancient Greece, where they had the forum, sort of the cradle of democracy, what we call today. But they had to learn how to be persuasive, and that was done through speaking. They wrote their speeches down, but they made the most impact by speaking. So like in my book, I go back and analyze some of the things that were done hundreds or thousands of years ago, and have examples from that in the book. Another thing I'm interested in is history. So that sort of helped me out a lot, as well as reading history, knowing history, and going through the examples of how people had promoted freedom in the past, going back thousands of years.
Michael, what's more important then? Is it the speech itself or the delivery of the speech?
I would say both, because if you do a bad job at the delivery and you do a great speech, it's not going to be effective. But at the same time, I would say there's a lot of things you can do when you prepare, when you write things down, as far as versus being extemporaneous. And if you have an important speech to give, if you have time to think about it, you can think of stories or examples that support your case. Also, I have a whole chapter on figures of speech, so things like antithesis, which is when Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Things, figures of repetition, when Churchill used the when he gave his famous speech in June 1940, "We will fight them on the beaches, we will fight them on the landing grounds." He uses a technique called an aphora, and I talk about 30 of those techniques in my book in one chapter. So really, when you prepare, you can use a lot of those techniques and be more thoughtful about what you're doing. Although you can't be in a situation where you have to ad lib and do something on the fly, but it's always good to at least have an outline of what you're trying to do. So I think a combination of both the preparation and the presentation are important.
Okay, sorry, Stephen, I got a follow-up question just because Michael touched on something that I had a question for. So taking it to like just the movie world and like and comics and stuff like that. Stan Lee, he's a creator of a lot of superheroes and things like that. And I noticed that actually he uses repetition. So like a lot of the superheroes' human or alias names or cover names are like start with the same letter. Have the same like endings. Like Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
Exactly.
Bruce Banner, the Hulk. What does that do? What does that do for how does that make people, like the audience, respond to it better? That repetition sound?
Yeah, we like patterns, and we like repetition. It's just part of the learning, and that's one called alliteration. So you remember that Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers, that old one. Yeah. It's very easy to memorize that way, and it's more memorable. So I have examples of that in my book. That's just one of 30 that I cover. But there's been studies done where those types of figures of speech and things like metaphors and simile, that actually what they did is they hooked people's heads up to MRIs, and when they hear things like that, it activates parts of the brain. So that repetition is very effective, for learning and memorizing things. And I think it's important, like in the older school tradition of memorizing poems and things that students did 100 years ago. I think that really helps people, help people to learn these techniques, which is sort of lost today, but it's very powerful. Yeah.
And some people are naturally gifted when it comes to speaking. Some people just have the gift of the gab, like Adam. And
you're the one who does the most speeches, mate.
But it becomes really much like a muscle, isn't it? The more you do it, the better that you become at it. Is Is that true? Is
Yeah, I think
just
definitely. Yeah. Because I know, like, I was in, Toastmasters for many years, and basically people come in with, very little experience, and they're scared, and they want to become better speakers. And I had watched people and helped them, coach them to go from a beginning person who's scared to get on stage to, winning a speech contest. So just through practice. So getting up there on stage and either ad-libbing or, creating a speech that you deliver. It's very important to get that practice. And even, something like Toastmasters is very good, but if you get involved in politics, that gives you a lot of experience as well.
When Adam and I were first starting, and I feel like I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker, although I feel like I'm becoming better as a speaker. And I would always write out this really, what I thought was like a well-written speech, and I would have to deliver it word for word off the page. And I used to get into trouble doing that. I remember one instance, I had Mark Latham down at the Spit Bridge. We were doing a press conference, and I had all these little notes that I'd cut up into like little bits of paper, and I would like cards, but because the wind was blowing, they were blowing all over the place.
Okay, yeah.
I couldn't peel the pages away.
Yeah.
It was so embarrassing. So since then I've moved. I just said, look, right, I can't rely on that anymore. I'm going to have to deliver my speeches ad lib. And we really learnt from Mark Latham, because we would go to events and there'd be all different speakers, and they'd be reading off a script or whatever. He would get up on the stage, he'd waddle up on stage, and without a single piece of paper in his hand, and he'd deliver the best speech of the day or the night. Do you have a preference? Do you have a preference with a actually written out speech, or should you have bullet points, or should you just be ad lib to be able to react to the crowd, react to the circumstances?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person and the occasion. So, like, for instance, you're talking about using the cue cards. Ronald Reagan was known as a great speaker, and most of his, greatest speeches were written out word for word, and he delivered them verbatim. And he had these cue cards, because I was at the, Reagan Library in California last year, and you could see the little cue cards. They still have them that he used. He would type up little text on these cards. Some people, they get very experienced and they're good at ad-libbing. They know what they want to say, and they can organize it in their mind and get up and speak. Some people, it might be, just having an outline of what they want to say. And probably a good compromise is, have an outline for the middle of the speech, for the important points, and then have a written out beginning, very, very strong beginning, and a strong conclusion. That are written out that maybe you memorize or you learn pretty well. So you might have like 1 page opening, 1 page closing, and then an outline for the rest of the speech. So I think it really depends. And if you're giving a really important speech, like, notice these speeches to Parliament, like, maiden address, or what they do in the U.S., the State of the Union, those are all written out, pretty verbatim. And I know there's, it gets into the like committees. It has to be written a certain way, so we don't offend anybody, or we don't say the wrong thing. So I know that can get very complicated the higher up people get in government. And these government departments, they'll have like a team of speechwriters, like for the top leaders, and they'll argue over points and write the final draft. But I think it gets a bit tedious. But I think it depends on the occasion and the person, what they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I found that I can memorize probably a 60-second kind of, like, if I had to do like a quick address, just a real quick 60-second thing, I could probably write it out and just read it over and memorize it.
Yeah.
But when I had to do 5-minute or 10-minute speeches, those ones I found that I was writing them out pretty much verbatim, and then I could, and then I found you're doing your research. You write out your speech, you type it out probably, you type it out, and then I would have it read it aloud to me. Just to see on the flow, and then I'd go through and edit everything that didn't quite work. Yeah. And then I'd kind of let it read it out to me. Once I was happy with the way that it was presented to me through the computer, then I would just read it over 4 or 5 times. I'd walk around the house, but I still felt like the piece of paper was it's a comfort, like it's a safety blanket. And you know, and I guess it also kind of depends on how you feel on the day. Like sometimes you can nail a speech and just hammer it out and just and deliver it well, and then sometimes you have this most brilliant speech and you might just get, you know, just that little bit of nerves, or your knees start to shake just a little bit, and you know, you can't quite deliver it properly. I feel like as long as if the content is strong, and if you stumble a little bit, but you can kind of get it out and kind of at least relate to the crowd a little bit, it might not have been your best performance, but I feel like it can still be, you know, a pat on the back for you. But if you kind of just balls it up completely, I mean, like, it's just a bad speech. What can you do, right?
Yeah. And I think you can, like, at least having something written down, you can avoid that really big disaster. Like, for instance, if you have to thank a bunch of people, like on a campaign, you need to thank like 10 different people that really helped you out. You know, you probably want that written down, because you're not going to, up there under pressure, you might forget somebody. And, you know, it's just a protocol. Or if you're introducing people like dignitaries, it should be done in a certain way, certain order. So it's good to have it written down as well.
Sorry, Stephen, would you be judged for reading those kind of things, those protocols off the paper?
I don't think so, no. And I think like reading off the paper is a skill as well that you develop. Like, people become better at that, like looking down quickly and just skimming it. And, you know, one thing I do is I use if I'm reading off this paper, I use like a 14-point type, just to have it big and double spaced. Double spaced. You know, you don't want a tiny type on a paper, so it's easy just to glance down and look up and have that information. But, you know, I find that I find the older I get, the harder it is to memorize. So it becomes more and more difficult. And I know, like, the top politicians, they have like the readers, the auto cue teleprompters, where it's which is, you know, makes it a lot easier. But that can go down. You know, some people like Obama, he would use those, but when that would break, he could barely speak because he was so reliant on it.
Hey, Michael, how important is storytelling and humor, inserting those into a speech?
Yeah, I think it's very important. And like, one of the things I talk about in the book is Aristotle. He wrote a book called Rhetoric, 2,300 years ago. And he has three modes of persuasion. One is called ethos, which is authority. So what people think of you when you get up on stage, or how you're introduced, or what you've done, is your ethos, just people, how they feel about you. You know, there's pathos, which is the emotional part. And there's logos, you know, with the words or the logical part. But I think the emotional part, storytelling, you know, comes through in the pathos, the storytelling. And we all grow up listening to stories and relating to stories. We go to the cinema, we read books. And a story is really a way to back up your idea. And there was a famous public speaking trainer. He taught people like Ronald Reagan, and his phrase was, make a point, tell a story. So when you make a point, you back it up with a story, like a story or an example. So the story is really what solidifies your point. Otherwise, if you're just saying like point A, point B, point C, it's just abstractions, really. And I know, you know, if you studied, many of us had to go through essay writing in high school as part of our English. And a part of a good essay is, you know, making a point and then backing it up with examples, facts and figures. And in a speech, stories are a very effective way of, getting your point across. And stories are more memorable. So, you know, sometimes people say, I don't remember your actual point in the speech, but I remember the story. So by remembering the story, they remember the point that you made indirectly.
Yeah, I find also when I'm telling stories, I can actually remember the speech better too, because it's a story that's probably directly related to what I've experienced anyway. So it was easy to. Also, I've got another one. What about things like, I did a speech once and it was the biggest, I had to deliver it in front of the most people I've ever had to deliver it. And I was also speaking with, pretty significant keynote speakers. So we were on stage, and Mark Latham, Craig Kelly, like Dr. Peter Reid. There was heaps of people. And it was about like, carbon dioxide and renewable energy and all that kind of stuff. So I I started off with a bit of humor. I felt like, because I walked up on the stage and I had a hands full of like all this stuff, you know, and I kind of like leaned in and said, you know, oh, I've been carrying around this for ages, you know, and had this stuff for ages. And then everyone kind of laughed a little bit. So I blew up a paper bag and I popped it on stage, and it kind of grabbed everyone's attention. I felt like that was pretty good kind of like technique. And then I obviously went into my storytelling. Is that stuff, does that kind of thing, like, is it good to do that kind of thing, or?
I think it depends on the event, you know, what in your audience, because if it's like a formal event, it might not be the best thing. But I know like those stunts, like you said, you know, the paper bag. I know there's a famous one, you know, and I don't want, it's sort of a negative example, but it's Bill Gates when he released mosquitoes into the auditorium. And he said, I released these mosquitoes and they contain malaria. So he's trying to make some kind of point. I don't remember exactly what it was, but you know, it was a stunt. Right. But I mean, you can always do a stunt, you know, something like that. And I know Stephen just asked a couple of minutes ago about humor, and now I think that using humor is very good, but it's always, you know, usually better if it's related to the subject or the audience. And somebody who was really great at this was Ronald Reagan. And what he would do when he was speaking to a group, you know, he would have some kind of joke that involved them. So some kind of joke. So like he spoke to a group of Italian Americans or something, and he talked about, you know, Christopher Columbus sailing to America, and people would, you know, criticize Reagan for his age, but he would say something like, you know, I remember that voyage, or something that would, you know, poke fun at himself as well. So he always had like a tie-in to the audience or the subject matter, if it was the right occasion, you know, not like a serious thing, like a funeral. You wouldn't do that, of course, but speaking to like the Association of Manufacturers or Retailers, he would talk about something that brought in, you know, manufacturing or retailing, some kind of joke or story. So it was always connected to the audience, and it was at the beginning to just sort of to create that connection with the audience. So I think that's really important. Yeah, humor can be very good, and you know, stunts also, things like that you mentioned. If you know, if they're done right, you know, if they don't blow up, but you know, it's always good to ask a few people, what do you think about this before you do it? Like, get some feedback from family and friends or people that would be in the audience, you know, that would, you know, just sort of workshop it a bit and see what they think. But I think it can work, like things like, you know, little stunts like that and humor are very effective.
I feel like it's safe to speak, to be honest. As well, I felt like it's safe to speech, because like that was one of those days where I got actually a little bit nervous, and then after that I kind of like, thank God I had my paper in front of me, otherwise I wouldn't have got through it.
Yeah, and you never know, really, you know, you never know how effective it is unless you talk to the audience afterwards. You might think it bombed and they'll think, oh, it's great, because everybody, a lot of people, they're just sitting like this with their arms folded, but they're still enjoying it, you know? Yeah. The body language isn't always, maybe they're nervous being in a room of crowded people or something, or it could be another thing, but you think you might have bombed, and you get up afterwards and people like tell you, you know, honestly, they thought it was a good speech. And I experienced that a lot in Toastmasters. Like, you know, I thought I bombed this speech, but I ended up winning like first place in the contest. So it's always like, you don't know. And they say that to use video, you know, use video to help you improve, just to analyze what you're doing, to look back at it. But really, it's hard to judge yourself, you know, sometimes, and we're our own worst critics as well. So keep that in mind.
And speaking is something that we take for granted. It's almost like breathing. And everyone's speaking, you know, all different events and circumstances around the world. But I think I was listening to one of your speeches. I can't remember who said it, but speeches can actually change the world. And there's been speeches that have been made throughout history that have changed the world. It's incredibly important, isn't it? And it's incredibly important to be able to deliver a speech in the right moment, and to make that moment, you know, really mean something.
Yeah, definitely. And I keep on going back to Ronald Reagan, because, you know, he used speech in a way that really did change the world with the Cold War situation. And, you know, he started out by calling the Soviet Union the evil empire. And a lot of people didn't want him to say that, his advisors and people in the White House. And then he gave other speeches, and he ended up in 1987 telling Gorbachev to tear down this wall. So, that really had a big impact, and we could see what a difference that made. Another one, of course, that comes to mind was Winston Churchill in World War II with his speeches that really helped boost morale and unite people against Nazi Germany. Other people like Margaret Thatcher, when she took over leadership in England, in UK, and her speeches as well. So you really can see how, speeches make a big difference going back in history. And we can look back at those and really, what I've done is analyze some of those and parts of those and see, what were the points that made them so great.
We obviously focus on the best speeches and the most memorable speeches, but can you think of a circumstance where a speech went wrong, or maybe it wasn't delivered the way it should have been, and it maybe felt flat?
What was the worst speech you've seen?
Oh, that's a hard question.
It is, because we do focus on the best ones.
Yeah, that's true. I thought of writing it like writing a book on the worst speeches, or like the most evil speeches in history. Something like that. Well, it'll probably pop into my mind. I know I was thinking about that a while ago, but I know, like in the U.S., there was one candidate who got up. It was like a Democratic candidate. This was a while ago, and he like started screaming, and they said, instead of "I have a dream," they said, "I have a scream," and that really that sunk his I think it was like 2008 or something. It sunk his campaign. And,
well, we saw it recently with Mike Pence. He said one, I can't remember what he said off the top of my head, but he said something that was just completely wrong, and he had to pull out of the president. Not that he had a chance to begin with, but he had to.
I think I've thought about that in the past, and I think I read something about that, but it's not popping into my mind right now. Yeah.
So I guess what happens is, like, speeches and things like that, it's all about like language and using language to get your point across and stuff like that. I guess we could move on to a little bit of so the meaning of words, especially over the last 3-4 years now, I've noticed, right? But the meaning of words is being manipulated and changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Man doesn't mean man like it used to mean. Woman doesn't mean woman like it used to mean. There's like so many examples like that, especially on the left side of politics, I guess. If the meanings of words are so easily manipulated and changed or watered down, what effect will it have on communication between generations, like later on, like, or now? Like, how can somebody like how can a 10-year-old speak to somebody who's 70 years old, who's got a completely different language, I think we just got to hold on to those and just stand firm with the definitions that we've known. Like when we're speaking, we don't accommodate. Don't try to accommodate people to fit into the norms. So like they have to fit you. So at least they hear that. And the other thing, the fact of changing meaning of words, changing holidays, changing customs, that's been repeated in history. Like, the French Revolution with the Jacobins, changing the names of the months and the days of the week and the holidays, and the Soviet Union after the Russian Revolution, trying to change everything, changing the names of cities and all this. We've all seen it in history, and it's just a sign that that those people are doing that are out of touch. They think that by changing the names and changing the meanings of things, they can change people's minds, but it never works in the long run. I don't think it does. And the other thing is, keep going. So sorry, I keep going.
Oh, and the other thing is like the language, complicated language. People like Robert Menzies, the Prime Minister of Australia, longest serving between 1949 and 65. He was a great believer in plain English, simple language, very straightforward. And he wrote. I quote him a bit in my book about his belief on that. But he said that things like the King James Bible were written very elegantly, very simply, easy to understand, and that's what he he went for in his own writing and his own speeches. And George Orwell, in his essay Politics in the English Language, he talks about how, authoritarians, they always use complicated language because they want to confuse people. And he gives example in that essay about, certain phrases that someone might use to really, when they're, trying to deceive you. And it's really complicated. So I think simple language is very important, just to get our messages across. And when we make things complicated, it's really just to confuse people. And I know more and more politicians are doing that.
And it can be used as a smoke screen as well. We know with these work terms, inclusiveness and
exactly, yeah,
the green energy and a whole bunch of terms that sound fantastic, but when you peel back the layer, there's a completely different side to it.
Exactly, yeah. And it's trying to control the language and make things more complicated and more complex, and confusing people by changing the definitions to things that we're not familiar with.
Yeah, well, I just find that you start getting sick of words now. Like when people use the word inclusive, resilient, and all these like buzzwords at the moment.
Buzzwords, yeah.
I mean, I hate that word resilient. Like, it's such a good word actually, and resilience is a quality, but it's used as I feel like it's weaponized now, and it just makes me feel bad, and I kind of get angry when I hear it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And, and then these words like inclusiveness and diversity, it doesn't mean like diversity of opinion. If like you could go into a company and, looking for a job, and if they find out what you believe, they're not going to hire you, because it's not about diversity. It's their definition of it, which is a narrow one based on, what you look like, or, where you're from, basically. Not diversity of opinions or beliefs.
It is literally the opposite of what it means, really.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because you go to these companies, like I worked in a company last year as a contractor, and everybody thinks the same. A lot of people think the same, basically. So they might look different, and they might, be from different countries originally, but their way of thinking, the view of the world is the same. So it's not diverse.
Yeah. So if you didn't wear, if it was Purple Shirt Day, to respect the homosexual group, all right, and then you decided not to wear one just for the hell of not wearing one. Not that you could have been not you, but you could be homosexual and didn't want to wear a purple shirt. And then
exactly, or you might have not received the memo. So
yeah, and then you'd get done for that. Like, that's it. You'd be on reprimand for that. Yeah. So you're right. Hardly diverse out there at all. Sorry, Stephen, you go for it.
Now, Adam and I have been to a lot of different events, and I think a lot of events make the mistake of thinking, we can pack the room full of a lot of speakers. We'll give them 10 minutes each, and we'll try and cram them all in. But it never works out that way. And a lot of events go over time, because people will, instead of speaking for 10 minutes, will speak for 45 minutes. Yeah. And you go to some events and you're just like, can you please shut up? Like, stop talking. And they'll just keep going and going and going. Now, my friend, I have this friend, and he's obsessed with American politics, and he always tells me the story about the Gettysburg Address. And before that's a speech that Abraham Lincoln gave. Now, before Abraham Lincoln spoke, Edward Everett spoke before him. I think he was a governor. He was a
senator.
Senator, was it? Yeah. 13,607 words, and he went for 2 hours. And then Lincoln walked onto the stage and spoke for 2 minutes and gave arguably what some people consider the greatest speech in American history. Now, how important is length of the speech, and is it better to go if someone says you can speak for 10 minutes, are you best to go right on 10 minutes? Are you best to go maybe 7 minutes, 8 minutes, or is it okay to go maybe a little bit over time? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll start with the first part with what you talked about, the Gettysburg Address. And I started the chapter of my book on simplicity in writing with that as an example. And, that's how I set the stage. But we talked about writing speeches and whether you're comfortable doing it. But like, when your speaking rate, let's say a lot of people speak at between 100 and 150 words per minute. So if you have 10 minutes to speak, then and you know that you speak at about 150 words per minute, then if you write it out, you need 1,500 words. So that's where writing can really help you when you know your limitations. As far as going over, I don't think it's a good idea because, if you're an event organizer putting everything together or an MC, it just makes life difficult for you. And most people, if you have like 5-6 people speaking at an event, they don't want someone to go for 45 minutes. I think that's being a stage hog basically. And, I don't agree with that. I think if you're invited up to speak on stage and they give you 10 minutes, you should show some respect for, the organizer, the MC, the audience by keeping it to 10 minutes. If you go 11, that's fine. Or, maybe 12, that's okay. But if you go to like 20, then you're messing everything up for everybody. And like you said, it just gets boring. And the people at the end of the evening are at a disadvantage because people are burnt out of hearing so much. So
Yes. Yeah.
If you have a problem doing that, then write it out, write it out and read it. Or like Adam said, have the computer do it for you. And I think you might be able to adjust the speed somehow in some programs, but read it out as you would at an event, and pause. It's important to pause when you speak, because if you read it out just very quickly, it's not going to be realistic. It's going to be a lot quicker. You need to like stand up and read it out as you would on stage, and then use a timer or use your phone to time it, and then determine how long it takes. That way you don't really, it makes for a better event and it makes you look better. Like if you're given 10 minutes and you speak for 30, it makes you look greedy almost by taking so much time.
I definitely think it's much better to go under time and then try and be as impactful as you possibly can. Get on the stage, get your message across, and then get off. And I think a lot of people appreciate that.
That's true. And the good thing about Toastmasters is a lot of the early speeches, the projects you do are like, you start out 5 to 7 and you go 8 to 10. So you learn how to really encapsulate your message in a short time frame and really get it across. So that gives you a lot of time, for if you want to make 2 or 3 points in that, you can talk about your points and then give a few examples and then wrap up at the end within that 10 minutes. And like the beauty of writing is that you have time to think about it, and you can choose the best stories. You can choose, the best figures of speech. You can simplify the language. If you go through and you see a word that's too complicated, you can find a synonym that's a lot simpler. So you can really hone it and make it, short and impactful by actually writing it out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've always rewritten and rewritten my speeches. And then sometimes when they go too long, I just try to summarize it and then maybe explain the summary. So like, because sometimes you write a speech, like it's a topic that you really know about. Like I felt pretty good on energy and things like that. So I was writing, like I could write 2 or 3 pages just off kind of like what I had known, especially when I was right into it. And then that's just far too long. So then what happens is you go through it and you kind of like write the story, and then you kind of summarize it, and then you have to try and get to your time, you expand it. But I think it's just rude to go over time, well over time anyway. I just think it's just annoying, and I think it's not good.
It shows a lack of experience, I think, because people that would be in that position that would know that they have a job to do. They've been invited up to the stage and under a certain time, and then they should try to stick to it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, you wrote this book, Speaking for Freedom, and we just went through the pandemic period where I think a lot of people were reevaluating where our freedoms came from in the first place. Were they just there, or was it from people that strove for them and fought for them, or maybe just got together and thought about them? What do you think? There's aspects of freedom that we've lost over time or possibly forgotten? Like if you go back and listen to speeches from the past, they might have been touching on elements that we don't talk about anymore.
Well, I think freedom of speech, really. I mean, that's one big one. That's really suffered a lot. And freedom to I guess freedom of association and belonging to groups. Like, before it didn't matter, let's say you worked at a company and you were active in, a church or something, nowadays it could be detrimental. So freedom of association, of belonging to certain groups or ideas, groups with ideas. And I think just basic things like the more and more laws are coming in as far as what you can do, what you can't do. Very basic things that impact our lives. Like where I'm in Victoria, they say, oh, you won't be able to have a gas stove anymore in a new home. And if you upgrade your old one, you won't be able to put a gas stove in again. Just small things like that, where they're just taking away our choices little by little in different areas. So I think in that respect, there's a lot less freedom. In some ways, there's more freedom in society, but maybe not, not good ways, or way people think that they can do anything that's detrimental to their health or what they put in their body. So I think that it's sort of a trade-off, but I do think we've lost a lot of things that we didn't think about. And the fact that technology makes it easier to track and control people, that's another added layer that makes it more difficult.
Yeah, we don't like technology tracking us, and all these 15-minute cities and things that are starting to come in, and people are still in state government still denying that they're even trying to push that stuff through. And then you have other people actually saying that it's on our table, we're talking about it now. And then you have a look at local councils and stuff like that, and they're starting to actually implement things that are going to lead to these 15-minute cities and this socialist ideal. So it's pretty bad what's happening at the moment with all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I know we talked a little bit earlier about the buzzwords. So that 15-minute city, that's something that someone thought up to make it sound good. 15. It sounds good. 15 minutes. I actually lived in a smaller town when I lived in Alaska, in Anchorage. You could get anywhere in 15 minutes, but it was because it was a lot smaller. It wasn't because you were constrained by how things were built or anything like that. But no, I think that that's one example of how people are being controlled more and more.
Well, I was speaking to a person who's got a doctorate. I think it's in town planning or something like that anyway. And he goes, traditionally cities were designed in 15-minute blocks. Yeah. So basically you can do anything you really can live day-to-day life within your 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. You can go to the shops, you can go to the farm, you can do those kind of things, which is fine. And I've got no problem with that. But as you touched on a great point there, because what happens is now that you say 15-minute cities are great, but what happens is when they surveil it and have you tracked and face logged and all that kind of stuff, and when you leave that 15-minute city, that goes against you. Okay, you've left once, you've left twice, you've left 3 times. Oh, you've hit your quota for the 6 months. Now if every time you leave that area, you're going to be fine. So in essence, they've created like a 15-minute prison, not a city.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Just using the language, like we said, using the language to make something that's not beneficial sound more beneficial.
Yeah, that's right. And I had somebody else talk to me about language, and I used to call my children kids, and then he pulled me up on it once, and he said, well, a kid is a baby goat, not a baby human. Mm-hmm. And he goes, it's all about language and how important it is. And it's kind of like detaching the importance of a human child and kind of like just referring them to like an animal. So, that's what I was trying to talk about before, like, with the manipulation of language and the weakening of meanings and stuff like that. Like, do you see, being so into language and obviously with your speech writing and stuff like that, do you see the decline of our language, from the 50s or 60s to now? Have you seen a big decline in the way we speak to each other and carry ourselves?
It's really hard to say, everyday conversations, but I think, there is a decline in just the overall education around the world, not around the world, but around the Western world, Australia, US. So before, people would learn to read a certain way and be taught things and read books, read literature. So they had sort of a stronger foundation for communicating, and things like I mentioned before, the King James Bible. people like Winston Churchill and Lincoln, they all were highly influenced by the language in that. And even things like, Shakespeare, it's a bit out of reach for a lot of people. But, there's a writer, Harold Bloom, who wrote the book, The Western Canon, came out in the 90s, and he talks about the greatest books in Western civilization. And he wasn't a religious person at all, but he said if he had to go to a deserted island to live, he would take the King James Bible, the complete works of Shakespeare, and Don Quixote to read. So those are the 3 books he would take. So I mean, as far as their impact on the development of language and the way people think, that really made a big difference. And I think that we're getting more and more away from those foundational works and foundational ideas that formed our civilization. So I think in a way, yeah, it is making communication less meaningful and more simple. And things like social media, like TikTok, and just the level of there's not level of depth to it, like a 30-second thing that you just flick through. You don't really get any kind of depth, so it makes it more challenging, I think, as between generations and as more people get exposed to that. So like a lot of people won't even read a book after they finish high school or uni, which really shows that you're not really developing your mind or keeping up with what's going on.
You've mentioned some historical figures like Reagan and Churchill and Menzies. Is there anyone currently out there in the political space that you consider a good speech or can give a good speech?
Yeah, I don't think at that level. Things I focus on the past speakers. I liked, I like some of the things like Nigel Farage did, his speeches. I like those. Those are pretty good. And another speaker that I really liked, who I saw in Melbourne probably 15 years ago, was Lord Monckton, who was speaking a lot about the climate change thing. He was very skeptical, and I could tell that he was more in that traditional speaking style, where he had been exposed to those traditional ideas, like the Churchill way of speaking and the figures of speech and the stories. Because when I was listening to his speeches, it reminded me of some of those great speeches. So those are probably 2 that come to mind, really at this time. So, and they're both from the UK, but I'd have to think about it more. But some of the speeches are just boring. They're not really inspirational, like like the Reagan speech or the Thatcher speech or the JFK. I liked his speeches as well. And
you wouldn't put Joe Biden there?
No. Yeah. And people talk like about Obama's speeches, but those were just when you could compare someone like Obama to Reagan, Obama was an amateur, basically. I mean, just the way he presented it, and it was a lot of figures of speech, but there wasn't really substance to it the way Reagan had it. You didn't feel that kind of sincerity and connection. And Reagan really had the great humor as well, connecting to the audiences, which Obama didn't have either. So, and Obama was speaking against freedom, so that's a big difference.
When I was apolitical, like I wasn't political at all, and I was in America when President Obama was president, and sometimes, and how all the channels will all of a sudden stream like a speech or something like that. From a presidential speech or an address. So I think we were sitting in a restaurant, you know what I mean, and we were eating. I was with my auntie and uncle, and his speech came on, and like I remember just like, it's a new experience for me to see something like that happen. So I was kind of interested as such, just as a kid. I don't know how old now, right? But I was just interested. And I'm watching it, and he didn't come across. I actually significantly remember that he didn't seem genuine in what he was saying when he was delivering his speech. Whether he was genuine or not, I don't know. But he definitely doesn't come across like he means what he says when he's saying it. And I think that's quite important. Like if we listen to, like, say, somebody like Jacinta Price in Australia might not be the best speech presenter in the world, but at least you believe what she says, or if she means it, you believe she means what she says. In other words, even same thing with even like Pauline Hanson, probably not the greatest speech deliverer in the world, probably definitely not, but she does give that sense of you believe her when she says it, and I think that's
exactly
very important. So
I think like Reagan, like when I was talking about him, that he was a radio announcer in his early 20s, and then he was an actor, and then he spent 10 years as a representative for General Electric, like speaking to people in the factories and on TV. So he really developed that, and he just developed a way to really feel like he's speaking to you as an individual when he speaks versus, just reciting something. And I think that's really takes a skill. So even if you do memorize the speech word for word, I think there's a way to, make it seem fresh. You have to make it seem fresh every time, and just connect with the audience. And I think things like we talked about earlier, like the humor and the connection and finding things in common with your audience. So like researching them and find something in common. Like if you speak to a group, let's say, a social group or a charity group, find out how you relate to them or you relate to their ideas, and then put that into the beginning of the speech, so it shows that you've done your research and that you agree with what they believe.
How would you analyze Donald Trump? Again, I wouldn't classify him as the most brilliant speaker, but he certainly is persuasive, especially to his audience. Is he using a particular technique, or is it just more that it's just a cult of personality with him?
No, I think he's basically like, he's two different styles. He speaks like extemporaneously, where he's just speaking off the cuff, or he has like an outline, and then he has like the formal speech where it's written for him, and maybe he's had some input into it. And one of the speeches he gave that I thought was very effective was in Poland, in Warsaw in 2017, where it was almost like a Reagan speech. The way it was put together, it had a lot of stories, connected with the audience. He talked about the connection between the United States and Poland, going back to the revolution when there were some Polish people in the American Revolutionary Army who were helping out. So he really created that connection through the stories and the way it was put together. But then on the other side, sometimes he'll be talking at an event like off the cuff, and he's very direct and very, very direct, and he can be offending some people, but that's just his style, where he comes from. Because I've known people from New York, from that same area, and they're the same way. They go around, they offend people. They don't think they're offending people. That's just the way they grew up, where people were like that, cutting each other down and stuff. So just his personal style, where he grew up, versus when things are done for him, like a speech is written for him, then it's a different way of doing it. It's much more formal and sort of constructed that way for him.
So not only have you written this book, Speaking for Freedom, but you've also started up a networking group and a community. Yeah. Do you want to let everyone know about that?
I call it the Freedom Leaders Network. And I know there's groups like that in the United States that people believe in, limited government and more freedom, better business. And there's several groups like that in the US. And I had this idea probably 3 years ago, and I felt that I had enough contacts on LinkedIn where I invited people. And the first time we had 20 people show up, which was, very good. And basically it's a way to network. So, maybe we could help each other, like find business for each other sometimes, or recommend your business to somebody else if you're in business, or if you're a professional. I'll probably invite students as well in the future, so they can maybe connect with potential employers. And it's just a way for people that have a similar mindset, similar way of thinking, and similar values to get together and connect with each other and help each other. And, maybe people don't agree. People might agree with 80% of the, their beliefs, but we're not going to fight over the 20% that we don't agree with, which I think is a mistake. And, in the freedom movement in Australia and other places where, people might agree on the basics, ideas, and then they might fight over, minor points, but it's more like a networking group. If you've been in something like BNI, which is a networking group where people get together and they, maybe try to give each other leads or referrals, then that's something that I want to create eventually, and have it. It's online right now, but maybe we could do it live in several places where it could be a way for people to network in business and in the professions.
And if people want to join it, is it by invitation only, or they just follow?
No,
you
just
on LinkedIn?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or just message me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. It's Michael Gladkoff and Speaking for Freedom. So yeah, you can just go there and connect with me and say you're interested, and I'll send you an invite. I went through and I was very selective. I didn't want trolls showing up and saying, people that don't agree with it and showing up and trying to debate us. So it's more of just a way for like-minded people to connect. So you can message me through Facebook or LinkedIn.
Well,
That's probably the best way to connect.
These groups do get infiltrated. It happens very, very easily. It's not just something that people throw around as some form of paranoia or something. It happens. It definitely happens. So you do need to be selective.
Yeah, I am selective. I'm very careful. I'm selective, and sort of I've been watching what people are doing on LinkedIn, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, to see, that they're freedom minded. And then when I see that through a comment they make or a like, then I'll invite them.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yes.
Hey, we all screen everyone now, because like we're the same. When you have your public profile pages, when you're like campaigning and whatnot, they just jump on and you'll say one thing and then they'll just hammer. They just fill up your comment feed with just junk, and you're just like, see you later. You just got to burn them. So yeah, you got to screen, be let in.
Yeah, and it's good because people, when people have similar beliefs and values, I mean, they're much more likely to want to share and help each other. And like at our first meeting, we had somebody that was working earlier for a think tank and another person that was in resource development. And, the person from the think tank had ideas for helping that person, in the resource development field. And they connected after the meeting, and a few other people connected. And we're sharing ideas. And the last one we're talking about, there's someone that does AI and search engine optimization, and he connected with another member. So it's a way for not just sharing business or helping each other make deals, but to share knowledge, really, to help each other with our knowledge.
Awesome.
We'll put those links to your profiles in the show notes, please.
Okay, great.
No trolls. No, only serious people. But Michael, we're not going to let you off the hook, because our final segment of the show is something called Build Your Own Fantasy Government. Now, the next Parliament of Australia you're in control of. You get to choose 5 or 6 people. They can be anyone, living or dead, past or present, experts in a certain field, maybe great orators, whatever you choose. But 5 or 6 people to head up the next government of Australia. Michael, who do you choose?
Okay. So they don't have to be from Australia, right?
No,
people just select all sorts of people.
Okay. Well, I would choose, for one is David Limbrick, who's from Victoria, who is, very strong supporter of people's rights, is one. And then maybe, from the past, I would choose Robert Menzies, because I thought he was very pro freedom, for his ideas and what was going on in the world at the time. Maybe from the UK, it'd be Margaret Thatcher, to sort of like, to bring her energy. So who else? Ronald Reagan, for his communication.
I was going to say, you got to call Ronald Reagan.
For his communication skills. Yeah. And then from it's one more. I'll probably choose like international one. I think maybe Charlton Heston.
Okay.
I gotta say, you hold David Limbrick in a very high regard against that company.
Yeah.
He's rubbing shoulders with Thatcher and Menzies and
Reagan.
Yeah, well, I read a bit about one of Charlton Heston's speeches, and I just, I thought he was a great speaker. He didn't really give that many speeches, but I thought they were powerful speeches as well. And maybe, I don't know, maybe just for a bit of like philosophy, maybe Ayn Rand is another one.
Okay.
I
You know,
don't
some
know
people
that
don't
one.
like her, but yeah.
I'll have to Google that one after the.
I'll have to Google her too. I don't know who she is.
Oh, you know, she wrote the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Ayn Rand
Okay.
was the writer who wrote those books. It was more of like a early libertarian. She escaped. Well, she left Russia in the 1920s, and she wrote the bestsellers Atlas Shrugged and the Fountainhead. And it's AYNRAND. I'm not really, you know, I'm not a cult follower of her, but I like her ideas and what she said. And she wrote books on philosophy and capitalism. And yeah, and she was very a good speaker. There's videos of her on YouTube, you know, speaking with different reporters and giving speeches. So I thought overall, yeah, she's another one I would add in.
Awesome. Well, I think after this episode, I think I'm going to actually start to download a few speeches. I know Stephen showed me the Acme Fight Back from Paul Keating. Okay, that was a good speech that we had a bit of a laugh about. And but I think I'm going to actually go on there, and I'm actually going to download some of those Ronald Reagan speeches and see and see what it was all about. Because when I started writing speeches, just on probably like a final footnote before we go, I wanted to capture my audience, and I was looking at, and I analyzed a few different speakers, and I even had a look at, like, you know, Hitler and like what he was doing to try and captivate his audiences, because let's face it, the whole nation watched him. And I was going to quickly ask you, have you ever analyzed like a dictator or like Stalin or Hitler's speeches, and were his speeches captivating, or was it the fear that made people like pay attention to them?
I think someone like Hitler was captivating. Stalin was, you know, it's pretty boring. But and the thing with Stalin is when after he spoke, people were clapping, and they didn't. You didn't want to be the first one to stop clapping, so they had to put in a bell to tell people it was okay to stop clapping. Otherwise, you could be taken away if you were the first to stop clapping. A little story from history.
Jeez.
But yeah, but you know, like, and I think like Hitler used, you know, certain techniques like rhetorical devices and things like that. And but it just shows you that it's a tool that can be used for good or evil, you know. So you can have people like, you know, Reagan that helped end the Cold War, you know, and Hitler that really, you know, created more war and death. So you know, it's important that you use it for good, use these techniques and knowledge for good, and that's my belief, and that's my aim.
Yeah. Now we have a lot of people that either have been on this show or watched this show that are approaching council elections later in the year, and different speaking events coming up. There may even be a federal election at the end of the year. So let's encourage everyone to head to Amazon, buy your book if you want to pick up some pointers from Michael about speech writing and persuasive language, and really just speaking on the lines of freedom, and really fine-tuning your message and to get it out there so people really absorb it. So
yeah, and if people connect with me on, you know, Facebook or LinkedIn or the other platforms, I'm going to be inviting people. I do free things, like free sessions. I'm doing one this coming Thursday for an hour, like a free training session on persuasive language at 8 o'clock Australian Daylight Time. So people connect with me on any of the platforms and just message me and say you're interested. I'll send you an invite. Definitely.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome. And I hope everyone enjoyed tonight. I know we were on X this time instead of Facebook, so it was a little bit different. Maybe give us some feedback on what you preferred. I know we did a poll, and the poll was overwhelmingly that people wanted us on X. You'll still be able to watch us on Facebook. You know, I'll still put the link in there, but we're just not live. But if you did prefer Facebook over Twitter, let us know. We do want to hear your feedback. And also, again, if you do want to support us, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee and throw us a few dollars there if you choose, of course. But other than that, I say it every single time. Please share this far and wide, especially if you do know people that would greatly benefit from the knowledge that Michael has given us tonight and would like to purchase a copy of Michael's book. Please send them to this podcast, also his Amazon link and his social media, so they can get in contact with him. But for everyone that watched tonight, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
See ya.
Thank you. See you.